Hello everyone, and welcome to a new video in your monthly updates on Science of Training Must. In this video, we're going to discuss regional hypertrophy for the pectoralis major while performing exercises like the flat bench press and the incline bench press. So first of all, I'm sure you get asked this question a lot. What's the difference between a flat bench press and an incline bench press? Or probably, does the incline bench press train the upper chest? Now, if we ask many bodybuilders, experts, or simply we just Google this question, we might get the same answer, and with confidence that the incline bench press trains the upper chest and the flat bench press trains the middle and the lower chest. Now, is that true? Is it supported by evidence? This is exactly what we're here to investigate and find out in this video. So first of all, let's go through some basic definitions. So a flat bench press is considered a flat bench press when it's parallel, as you can see here, when it's parallel to the floor, like this, flat, fully flat. As for the incline bench press or the incline bench, it's a 15 to 60 degrees angle. So it can start from a simple 15 degrees angle. It can go all the way up to around 60 degrees. It can be 45, 50, 60 degrees. Now, why you can use these variations? Well, it depends on your client's mechanics. It depends on your client's comfort and definitely preference. So this is something definitely for you to experiment with your clients. Now, is it true that what the experts are saying, that flat bench press puts more emphasis on the lower pecs, middle and lower pecs, or what's also known as the sternal head of the pectoralis major, while the incline bench puts more emphasis on the upper pecs, or also what's known as the clavicular head. So here's a question, and definitely how we usually answer these questions. First of all, we start from science, anatomy, mechanics, and then we check the evidence. We check the studies and high quality studies to see if we have enough studies and enough research to whether confirm or to reject this hypothesis. So this is what we're going to discover. So here's the outline of this video. So first of all, we're going to discuss briefly the definition of regional hypertrophy. We're going also to have a quick refresher on anatomy of the pectoralis major, and we're going to discuss things like origin, insertions. I'm sure you already discussed these in your personal training courses, so this could be like a refresher for you. And we're going also to talk about the nerves that innervates the pectoralis major, and we're going to talk about the action. So these are things to discuss when it comes to anatomy. Then we're going to talk about a study that was published in 2022 for Albarello and his colleagues on this specific subject. And finally, we're gonna have a take-home message that hopefully you can take and use with your clients. So let's begin first of all with our refresher. So as you remember, pectoralis major, it's a muscle that it's in the anterior portion of the thorax or the trunk, and it's superior. So it's a large muscle. It's probably the largest muscle in your trunk. So it starts all the way from here, all around clavicle and sternum, and goes all the way inside the humerus. So this is your anterior deltoid over here. This is portion of your middle deltoid, definitely your biceps muscle. And here is the pectoralis major. And as you can see, that's the clavicular head here. And it's clearly obvious. That's the clavicular head. Why it's called clavicular head? So it's called clavicular head because it originates from the clavicle. Almost half of the clavicle here. That's the other half of the clavicle. And then there's the sternal head that it originates from the sternum, as you can see here. So that's the sternal head. When we say regional hypertrophy, it means that if it's true that regional hypertrophy exists, meaning that if I perform an exercise, like for example, if I perform the incline bench press, part of the chest muscle is going to have more hypertrophic gains or hypertrophy more than the other part of this muscle. And this is what we're going to investigate. What we know so far, we have several research on hypertrophy, on regional hypertrophy, and in different places and different muscles of the body, showing good results and showing that probably regional hypertrophy exists. And it's something that is interesting to read more about and consider, especially while working with physique athletes, because mainly bodybuilders and physique athletes are interested to have more hypertrophy gains in specific areas, to have a more symmetrical body and symmetrical muscles. So moving forward to, and here's another picture for the pectoralis major, and you can see here only the pectoralis major, and clearly you can see the clavicular head. That's the clavicular head over here, and definitely the sternal head. And let's look a little bit look at the origin and insertion here. So the origin of the pectoralis major, middle half of the clavicle, and that's obvious, middle half of the clavicle, and that's for the clavicular head mainly. This is the origin of the clavicular head. And the sternum, here's the sternum, that's the other part of the origin. 6 costal cartilages, the cartilages between the ribs and the sternum, so the muscle attached on the costal cartilages, and the aponeuroses of external oblique muscles. So remember, the muscle have a fascia that extends from it, and this is called the aponeuroses. So the pectoralis major muscle, especially this part, the lower part over here, attaches on the aponeuroses of the external oblique muscles. So that's the origin. Where it inserts, obviously it's on the humerus, specifically on the lateral lip of the intertubercular groove. So as you can see, that's the groove. We have a lateral and medial lip. So there's a lateral and medial lip. So it inserts on the lateral lip of the intertubercular groove of the humerus. So that's the for the origin and the insertion. Now, definitely the question, is this treated as a one muscle? It's true, it's a one muscle. However, the pectoralis major can act as 2 muscles in one. Why? And that's basically because the muscle is innervated with 2 different nerves. So as you can see here, the 2 heads of the pectoralis major have different nervous supplies. The clavicular head have a supply from the lateral pectoral nerve, while the sternal head have a supply from the medial pectoral nerve. And this raised the probability that this muscle can be treated as 2 muscle, and probably we can benefit from regional hypertrophy here. But again, this is not enough, because this is science, that's anatomy. We need further evidence. We need some controlled trials, probably randomized controlled trials, probably some systematic reviews that look at this or discuss this topic. At the moment, we don't have enough meta-analysis and systematic review, so we're going to look at some trials and some experiments, and one of them is what we're going to be discussing next for Albarello and his colleagues. Now, let's just remember the action of this muscle. So we know that this muscle is powerful in abduction. So things like cable crossover, abduction, when you bring your arms together close to your body. Transverse abduction. So if your arm is in this plane, okay, so if your arm is in this plane, the horizontal plane or the transverse plane, the pectoralis major is capable of doing what we call the transverse adduction. So it's like in chest flies, or as well in bench press. The muscle is also capable of doing internal rotations, and the muscle is capable of assisting in flexion and extension. But however, this is still a big question mark, and specifically extension. Several studies or EMG studies were able to show that this muscle is engaged or activated during flexion and extension. However, it's still debatable, because as you know, we don't rely heavily on EMG studies when it comes to long-term hypertrophy, when it comes to results like strength and hypertrophy, and especially whenever it's considered on the long run. So after looking at the anatomy and talking about the defining regional hypertrophy, it's time now to look at this study from Albarello and his colleagues, and that was published in 2022, and that discuss and the title of the study, non-uniform excitation of pectoralis major induced by changes in bench press inclination leads to uneven variations in the cross-sectional areas measured by panoramic ultrasound or ultrasonography. So this is what we're going to discuss, what happened here, and it will make the title clearer once we start discussing the study, definitely. So the purpose of the study was to get people to do the flat bench press, incline bench press, and measure two main things. First of all, the EMG activation. And since we already discussed that EMG is not 100% reliable, they also measured muscle swelling, meaning muscle thickness and cross-sectional areas using an ultrasound machine. Usually EMG is used during the exercise, as muscle swelling measurements or ultrasound measurement is used after performing the exercise, trying to back up the findings of the EMG and trying to have something that is more practical and more reliable when it comes to determining if regional hypertrophy is happening or not. So that was the purpose of the study. The hypothesis, and this is the hypothesis, I just took this screenshot from the original article. So they're saying that we would expect that the pectoralis major head with the greatest EMG amplitude or greatest activation during exercise will be the one with greatest acute variations in muscle architecture. So they're saying that the portion that have the most EMG activation will also have the most muscle swelling or hypertrophy or regional hypertrophy. And this is something that we're going to look at. So what they did is they recruited 13 male resistance trained candidates, so 13 subjects. And this is while you're reading the study, if you're reading n equals to 13, n is the number of subjects here. Now I understand you might be thinking that it's a small sample. I totally understand, but again, we don't have enough studies at the moment, so this is a good study to begin with, and probably in the future we might have studies with a larger sample size, and especially it's really challenging to control all variables, and especially when we have a large sample, or n is like 60 or 70. Gender, as you can see, all of them, they were male candidates. And the age, the average age is 28. Average height of the participants, 174 centimeters. Definitely there's a plus minus, that's the average. And their weight is something around 80 kilograms. They had to be injury free. So, and also they had to be performing bench press or resistance training in general for a year. That was one of the inclusion criteria. They should not be performing any other form of physical activity because, you know, like, as you know, in studies, we try to control all variables. So imagine that we're trying to conduct a study on the difference between flat bench press and inclined bench press, and some of the subjects, some of the participants are performing push-ups or any form of exercises that involve the chest muscle. So we cannot actually tell if the results that we will get was actually showing the difference between only the flat bench press and inclined bench press, or it was affected by other external variables. So lastly, one of the inclusion criteria was that the participants should be performing, should be able to have an RM of, in the bench press, definitely, they should have an RM of more than their body weight, at least their body weight or more. Okay, they didn't ask in the research more than their body weight, but they said at least their body weight. So for example, if their body weight is, if some of the participants' body weight is 80 kilograms, their 1 RM should be a minimum of 80 kilograms. So that's the inclusion criteria. So they got these, they were able to recruit 13 subjects. What they did next is that they performed 4 sessions. So that's the study design. They performed 4 sessions. The first session, it was more like a familiarization session, and same as the second session. So they were trying to familiarize everyone about the testing protocols, about the exercises, and checking if they, even if they've been training for a year, if actually their RM was at least their body weight. And so that's what happened in the first session. So they did the RM assessment. And the way they did the RM assessment, they did the RM assessment for both the incline and the flat bench press. And they randomly chose which exercises they're going to test first. So they weren't like telling everyone, we're going to start with the incline and then we're going to do the flat bench press for your RM testing. They just randomly chose that just to make sure that this is naturally happening, and there's no other factors, probably psychological factors, that are going to affect the testing. They also used ultrasound to measure, and they did the ultrasound measurements. And the reason why they did it is just to make sure that there's enough reliability. Not sure if you remember the term reliability from your fitness testing chapter. Reliability is when you test something several times and you get almost the same results. And this is something very important in research. So they tried to do the first and second session doing the ultrasound and RM to check if there's enough reliability while doing these tests. And this will increase the accuracy of testing and results later in the intervention sessions. So that's for the ultrasound testing. They didn't do any intervention activity, no EMG work, because they weren't actually asking them yet to train or perform any set of bench press. They were just doing the RM testing. So the RM assessment, as you can see here, on both flat and incline bench press, and the incline bench press was for 45 degrees. And they had 30 minutes rest in between. So once they did the RM for whether the flat or the incline, then they gave the participants 30-minute rest, and then they did the other test. So again, as we mentioned, exercise orders for RM testing was randomized. For the second session, same thing happened as the first session, and it was done for reliability purposes, as we just explained. Now, so that's for the first 2 sessions. It's mainly testing, preparation, familiarization. Now, here's where the intervention takes place. So in the third session, what they did is they actually asked them to perform either the bench press or the incline, either the flat bench press or the incline bench press. And again, that was randomized. So they randomly chose an exercise for the participants to perform, whether it was the flat bench press or the incline bench press. And the third session took place 72 hours after the second session to allow enough time for recovery from the RM testing and to make sure that nothing is causing any noise on the final results. So they asked the participants to perform 4 sets of whether flat or incline bench press. And again, that was chosen randomly, but they have to choose only one and perform only one. And these 4 sets were to failure. So sets to failure. The reason why is they need to make sure that they're training everyone almost on the same level of effort. So it's 0 RIR, training to failure, with 60% of their RM. For the 4th session, it was 96 hours after the 3rd session. And again, the reason is to make sure that there's no longer any muscle damage and the muscle is properly recovered. So to have almost the same performance on the 4th session, and it was same as the third session. However, they did the other exercise now. So if they did the flat bench press on the third session, here they were performing the incline bench press. Same thing, 4 sets to failure with 60% of RM. So I believe now you're excited to look at the findings and results. So here we go. We start first of all by looking at the results of the EMG, because while they were performing the exercises, they were measuring their EMG activity, and EMG stands for electromyograph. So they placed 2 electrodes, one on the upper chest or clavicular head and one on the sternal head, and they monitored the activity during the flat bench press and during the incline while doing the incline bench press in all 4 sets. And as you can see, so if we just look at, for example, the third set, whatever you can see here with the square, with the white square, it represents the clavicular head, and with the black dot, with this round black dot, it's the sternocostal or sternal head. So when it comes to the third set, for example, if we're looking at the third set, during the flat bench press, that's the, as you can see here, this is the activity of the clavicular head. And obviously in the flat bench press, the sternal head was way more active. Now, if we want to compare this with the incline bench press, in the incline bench press, obviously the clavicular head was way more active. So if we're just going to look at the EMG results, and definitely you can look at something similar in the fourth set or second set and so on. If we look at the EMG results can actually confirm with our initial hypothesis in this video that incline bench press focus on the upper chest and flat bench press focus on the middle and lower chest. So, or sternal head, because we're still, we haven't tested if it's, you know, the whole sternal head or not, and if it actually exists, the lower chest, it actually exists or not. So let's say sternal head, better to use this term at the moment. So now again, this is EMG results, and we mentioned that in several videos. We even have in our monthly updates on Science of Training, I don't remember which issue it was, we have a video talking about EMG and the limitations that we have and why we cannot rely 100% on EMG results. I'll give you an example. If you're trying to test your client's EMG or muscle activation for the quadriceps while performing squats, while performing leg extension, and probably while performing vertical jumps, what we know is that your quadriceps is highly active while performing the vertical jump. But does that mean that vertical jumps are going to induce hypertrophy? Anecdotally, we know that's not the case. So that's why we cannot rely only on EMG activities to have all these conclusions. This is why in this experiment, what they try to do is to look at muscle swelling or cross-sectional areas, the variations, the cross-sectional areas, and muscle thickness. So here you have muscle thickness and here cross-sectional areas. And again, we're trying to compare that difference between flat bench press and incline bench press. So looking at muscle thickness in the flat bench press, it's obviously more for the sternal head. And in the incline bench press, it's more for the clavicular head. However, what I want you to look at is I want you to compare both exercises. So if I'm comparing both exercises, and I'm not sure if you noticed that, the gains in the clavicular head, when it comes to the muscle thickness, it's the same for the clavicular head or the upper chest in both flat and incline bench. As for the sternal head, it's different. So sternal head is way more active in the flat bench press compared to the incline bench press. And you can look at something similar here when it comes to the cross-sectional areas. So obviously in the flat bench press, the sternal head was more active in the flat bench press. As for the clavicular head, had the same level of thickness or cross-sectional area growth in the cross-sectional areas. And these results are a little bit confusing. Why? Because they don't concur with the previous EMG activation results. So now, on one hand, we have the EMG results saying that inclined bench press activate the upper chest more than the, way more than the flat bench press, while here it's saying incline and flat, they activate the upper chest the same, exactly the same way. So let's try to understand what's happening here. First of all, if we look at the conclusion that we get from the researchers, and they report that they've noticed more activation on the upper chest in the incline bench press, and they reach to this conclusion: the manipulation of exercise selection, or specifically the bench press inclination, may be a useful strategy for coaches and practitioners. So it may be useful. Why? Because of the EMG activation. However, as you know by now, that EMG data from the study doesn't allow useful inferences to be made. It's not enough as EMG data in general. And specifically in the study, whatever, like if you try to dig deep in the study and it's outside of the scope of this video and our courses, there's a way that where the results were normalized, meaning that the results were reported like an average, and this way in reporting the result doesn't really reflect reality. And this is why we cannot take these EMG data into consideration, into account. So EMG data, it is usually useful, but it's limited. It's useful to show activation, but it's limited to show hypertrophy, and specifically regional hypertrophy. And this is why we try to use muscle swelling. However, muscle swelling, again, it's not the best way to show or to represent regional hypertrophy. So it's better than EMG activation, but it's still not the best way to represent regional hypertrophy. So as you can see here, muscle swelling findings suggest flat bench press is better for mid-chest development and provide a similar stimulus to upper chest compared to incline bench press. Yes, muscle swelling data, it's better than EMG, but still it's not everything. Why? Because hypertrophy, it's a multifactorial thing. Acute muscle swelling may indicate increase in blood flow, edema, and metabolic activity, which raise the probability of hypertrophy. However, its usefulness as a proxy for hypertrophy is limited. It's not 100% is going to dictate hypertrophy. Probably muscle swelling is going to happen, but probably long-term hypertrophy might not happen. So this is why we definitely still need more research to confirm this topic. So multiple variables influence hypertrophy, and this is why we always recommend that personal trainers, coaches, our members, our dear members, you should always do trial and error. Definitely, you have science, you have the evidence, absolutely, but with your clients, and especially if they're trying to focus on a specific goal and it's regional hypertrophy, trial and error is very important. Probably your client is more comfortable with an incline bench press and they're seeing more results. Probably this doesn't apply on another client because of their biomechanical differences and because it's a topic that is not yet well understood in science. So differential hypertrophy in the upper and mid chest due to exercise selection can be considered regional hypertrophy. So we can, to a certain extent, consider that, yeah, probably incline bench press can help develop the upper chest, probably, not 100%. And this is science, this is reality. In many cases, trainers and people think that we should have a clear answer, black or white. It's not the case, unfortunately, when it comes to science and research, because we still need a lot of research to investigate. Definitely, we're in a better place now compared to 20 years ago. However, we still need more research to be more confident. So what I can say right now is that, will I consider training the upper chest for a client that wants to train or want to focus on the upper chest? Will I still consider giving the incline bench press? Definitely, if that's the case, because now the probability are a little higher that it's going to train the upper chest. So predicting regional hypertrophy based on exercise selection is still not reliable. We need more study. So longitudinal or long-term hypertrophy findings from existing research contradict the muscle swelling data in the study. There was a previous research or a couple of previous research showing or providing more advantages for the incline bench press and supporting the incline bench press, that it can train the upper chest. So that's a different study for Chavez and colleagues that you can review later on, or you can read later on. This study, it supports more the concept that incline bench press trains the upper chest. However, like any study, it also had its own limitations. So more research definitely is needed to determine the effect of incline and flat bench press for regional hypertrophy. The present study is interesting and it adds to our information. However, as a final take-home message, this is an excellent study and it's a great study to begin with and to start. Definitely, in the future, we need more research taking into consideration EMG results that are not normalized or not collected as an average. And definitely, we need to have more long-term studies with probably more participants in the study. Second thing here is, if your client is a beginner, so that's take-home message. If your client is a beginner or your client have a general goal, a flat bench press can be more than enough and a well-rounded exercise. So because the flat bench press do train the upper chest, do train the middle chest and most of the parts of the chest, the clavicular and the sternal head. And definitely your client couldn't care less at this stage, whether they're beginners or if they have general goals. When I say general goals, meaning that they just want to be active, lose fat, they just want to tone their muscles, and they're not looking at specific results. Last take-home message for today is, if your client is a physique athlete and want to improve the clavicular head, so you're training a bodybuilder, they're training for a competition or for personal reasons, and they just want to improve their upper chest, they've been doing several chest exercises, is it worth it to include the incline bench press as an exercise here? The answer is definitely include the incline bench press. And again, you need to do a couple of trial and errors, include the incline bench press for a couple of weeks, try to change the inclination to find the sweet spot for your client. So I hope that was an informative video. I hope you're enjoying the way we're tackling research and the way we're breaking down the findings, and we're coming up with conclusions. And I would say the healthy way in coming up with conclusions, not a yes or no or a definitive answer conclusion, but it's another piece of the puzzle that we add to our toolbox and our knowledge, where it will help us better design and better train our clients. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, and I will see you in future videos in our monthly updates on Science of Training Must.